Well, I am Donald William Elmore, and I taught high school in Somerset for 27 years. And for 5 years, I was teaching off-campus classes for the University of Kentucky. Of course, all that in history. And I retired in 1999. And since then, I grab every opportunity I can to teach. In about 74, I started a reenactment unit based on the 4th Kentucky, which was the Orphan Brigade unit that was organized in South Central Kentucky, along Adair County, Taylor County, Pulaski County, and south in McCreary County. And that was the unit where the men from the 4th Kentucky came from. And so that was what we designated ourselves. We dedicated ourselves to being 4th Kentucky. And it kind of worked out good because the 4th Kentucky Union was at the Battle of Mill Springs. So we had that versatility. We got Union counterparts as well, and we could portray Union or Confederate. So that gave, and keep calling ourselves 4th Kentucky. So a lot of reenactors did that back in those days. You know, they tried to be as versatile as they could and become what is necessary in the battle.
How many different characters, well, I say characters, have you played, you know, the Confederate and then the Union? Have you, you know, as far as, have you done?
You mean individual people?
Yeah.
Well, what we do is we pick a person that actually was in that particular unit. And we take their name, we learn what they did before the war, we learn what happened to them after the war, and we portray that person in a first-person thing for visitors that would come through our camps. And I portrayed 3 different people over the years, from 74 to 85, when I finally got too tired of sleeping on the ground.
So what is it about doing the reenactments that really drive you to continue to do it?
Well, there's challenges in many ways. First way is by education. We want people to get a visual of what the war was like and what the people that fought it were like. And when we go first person, kind of like what I did today, we portray a person and we avoid any connection with the with modern age like that. For instance, we was in camp one time and this guy came up with a cigarette and wanted to know if we had a light, and I said, "What do you got in your mouth?" And we just gotta get away from associating ourselves. And like today, when somebody back there asked a question about what happened to the house, well, I'd have no way of knowing, because Buckner passed away in April the 1st of 1914. And he lived in the house at that time, and he would have no way of knowing what happened to his son or to his house. So we try to lock ourselves into the period of time that's appropriate. Like here, if we were doing it, we'd lock ourselves in to 1862. And of course, we would not know about Gettysburg. That's a year later. And things like that. And it takes a lot of mental discipline to lock ourselves in. Another thing about it is that we try to experience as close as possible what those people did, what they ate, how they acted, when they had to drill and march everywhere they went. Of course, we just do it for a weekend. Those guys did it for 4 years, winter, summer, and spring. And it makes you appreciate, doing it for 3 days makes you appreciate what they went through.
Are there any Buckners still around that were related to him? And then have you met any of them?
2 of the people were here today that was descendants. They sat back there kind of on the back pew.
Yours.
Tell me, talk to Grandson?
I talk to Bill Buckner 4 or 6 times a year, and that's the governor's grandson, the son of Bolivar, who was killed at Okinawa. And a lot of the stuff in my talk I got from Bill Buckner. The story about Shelbourne Matthews saying I is the handsomest, that I got from Bill. And of course, this hat that I was wearing, I think somebody already got it. There is a photograph of General Buckner sitting with his uniform, and that hat is hanging on a shelf. And I zoomed in on that, and I reproduced the hat from that image. I just got a kepi at a reenactment, and then I put the chicken guts on the top of it and the braid around the side. But I had to really blow it up to be able to get that kind of detail. And it had an emblem on the front. It kind of looked like a peanut, silver peanut. And nobody knows what that is. If it was a Kentucky State Guard emblem or if it was a Corps badge or whatever, but it was on his hat. So I took tinfoil, wadded up and shaped it and put it on the front. And I still love to know what that is.
Now, when it comes to reenacting compared to something like teaching it in a classroom, why do you think, or what do you think is more, leaves a better impression?
In today's world, people love to be entertained. And a reenactment is a form of entertainment, of acting, portraying a historic event. But in a classroom, it's in a controlled atmosphere. And I always like to get my classes emotionally involved in the events. And I tried to, when I tell about 13 days of the Alamo, I've got people weeping before that's over. And of course, that's what I struggle for. I try to make history live for them, and that's what we did in reenactments.
How important do you think that is for the generations that we have now and for future generations?
In today's world, they have completely forgot about it. And I wish there was something I could do to turn it back and get people excited about it. Reenactment units are beginning to dwindle in numbers and disappear, and roundtables are beginning to have the same problem. Young people of this generation just aren't interested. And so now when I do this and have a nice bunch of people gather in a place like this, and it's my last chance to teach. So I enjoy it.
But do you think it's important for the younger generations to really embrace history in order to learn from it?
I think it's very important to keep history going and accurately and pass it on to each generation so they'll know what happened, because if you don't know your history, you're going to repeat it. So like I told my classes, I would teach the good and bad and ugly about American history. And I didn't sugarcoat anything. And that's what I did, and I covered it. And of course, my kids used to say I taught the Civil War and Reconstruction and the insignificant events before and after, which is pretty close to what I did. I'd spend, Scott, how much time would I spend on the Civil War? Do you remember? Every enjoyment. You're one of my kids back there. But anyway, it's what I chose to do in my career, and I enjoyed it. And I hate to see our country falling apart now when the young people are forgetting about the importance of history. I think it's just as important as mathematics and politics and science. Of course, the bug bit me early on loving history.
How old were you when you got that?
When I got that bug, about 8. My cousins and I we'd go to these Civil War battlefields like Shiloh and Chattanooga, and a souvenir we would get would be those gray and blue paper keppies. And while sometimes the kids were playing cowboys and Indians, we played Yankee and Confederate. And we would charge at each other up and down the backyards. And so, I mean, that lit the fuse, and I've just been consumed by it ever since.
Now, myself, I had dyslexia when I was in school, and so I didn't learn anything. I learned about history and science and stuff like that by watching documentaries. And I know that you can't base history off of what you see in a movie, but when you see a movie, what do you think is the difference between someone trying to learn history from a movie compared to...
That is an excellent question, because my other passion is movies. And when I was teaching school, I used movies in the classroom. But I would cover an event like Sherman's March to the Sea and the Atlanta campaign. I would tell them what happened, and then I'd show them Gone with the Wind. Then I would say, all right, pick it apart. What did they do wrong in the movie? And it amazed me to see that they picked up on that. And they told me the mistakes of the production of Gone with the Wind. And I do the same thing about other things, that appeared with motion pictures being made about them. And of course, it wasn't a controversy, but well, I guess it was, but it wasn't what it is now. But I showed them Birth of a Nation. And of course, that's the big banned movie right now, because it was glorified the Ku Klux Klan. And I showed it in a way that did not glorify the Ku Klux Klan. I explained that they were wrong, but that's the way it was. They were wrong, but that's what happened. And so when I would use these movies, I'd use them as teaching tools so that they would be critics of history presentations and being able to pick them apart. And if you see a movie, say, did that happen? Well, you look it up and see if it happened or not, and then you learn from it.
At least it's a way to visualize what something may have been like. But that's why, for what I'm doing here, is I'm trying to get interest in people to come to these live events, because these are quite unique. And we have yet to do the Civil War reenactments, but we have done a couple of World War II reenactments. And there's nothing like standing next to one of those tanks when they go off and that kind of thing. But basically, I wanted to get your opinion on what do you think the future generations and the generations now really need to do to really learn from history. And
well, the direction it's going now, I don't see much future for it. We've got to stop rewriting history and realize that lost cause was a real thing to them. You learn about what the people that participated in it, how they felt. And now they're saying the lost cause theory is bogus. And they say that we've got to stop teaching from the lost cause point of view and teach it from bondage of slavery. And I taught about slavery. I showed them movies about it. And I showed the black heroes of history, and I showed them Harriet Tubman. We talked about Harriet Tubman, talked about Nat Turner, And a lot of those people. And then when the post-war years, we talked about the inventor of the peanut. What was his name? Peanut butter.
Oh,
Washington.
John Washington Irving.
No, that was the author.
Yeah, George Washington Carver.
George Washington Carver, that's right. And you know, he was a hero. I mean, you can't live by bread alone. You must have peanut butter. So